Dear guests, live and virtual participants of this 2 days conference, here we are again, this time with Mrs. Siria Taurelli, who is a senior expert on human resources representing the European Training Foundation, the agency of the European Union that supports human capital development policies. Mrs. Siria Taurelli has a long-standing focus in lifelong learning, and she's the coordinator of governance and quality assurance of skill systems. Good evening, Mrs. Taurelli. I'm very happy to have a small chat with you. And I would like to hear more about the interesting things that you do during our conversation. And that's why I would like to let us understand about the significance of lifelong learning in today's evolving market conditions, not only the pandemic, but also the recent war breakout, because that disturbed the markets also. And especially, I mean, the importance of lifelong learning in relation to employability, because learning should be used in making companies productive and employees healthier and wealthier.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and good afternoon to everyone. Lifelong learning is quintessential to the time we are living now. Lifelong learning is monitored and looked at European level through dedicated policies. We heard today and yesterday the skills agenda, the priority given to upskilling and reskilling, which sends a message that lifelong learning concerns everyone. But lifelong learning is a complex environment, and what is looked at, there are targets to be achieved at any group of population for any age. The European Union looks at target for basic foundational skills for all population, where there is an idea to achieve better skills at basic level for all population compared to what we have now. There are targets for digital skills that we heard constantly during this conference are so key to contemporary economy and society. And lifelong learning means having targets and having wide participation on early education, early childhood education and care, to reduce the numbers and percentage of young people leaving education before they complete compulsory education or secondary or education, so that they attain a certificate, a qualification, but also a diploma that make them employable. Tertiary level attainment are important. This concerns school-based as well work-based learning and adult participation in learning. Let's not forget that lifelong learning means from early childhood, from early stage in our life through our professional life and beyond. We heard other speakers, I can only agree with that we cannot learn a set of skills that make us employable for all our life. There is a need to refresh, to update, to change, maybe to reskill and upskill on a regular basis. That's the importance of lifelong learning, which is recognized more and more, but at the same time also represent a challenge. If we look at the statistics in the last 2 years, unfortunately, all say numbers and statistical documents tell us that participation in education as well as in adult learning or continuing training and education has decreased due to the pandemic. So we have a lot to do to improve, but in addition, we also have to catch up.
Do you think that the targets that you said that refer to skills would be better if the targets had also how many people are employed or they improve their career after having followed lifelong learning sessions, years, or diplomas, or whatever. I mean, change a little bit the essence of targets.
Absolutely. I mean, all studies converge on the fact that in any societies or in any city or in any territory where there is a better educational attainment, the business also is more prosperous, and the territory and the local environment becomes more attractive as well for young talent, for business, for startup, because they create an environment where there is a virtuous, let's say, circle between better skills, better human capital, and better economic and social development. This is proved time and again. Even if we go to the level of individual businesses, individual enterprises, it is demonstrated that the best performing companies are those who invest in the skills and reskilling of their employees on a regular basis. There is more than that, of course, but this is more and more recognized as an essential ingredient for company success.
Yes, definitely. You know better than everyone else in this room about the role of the different actors, because we are going to talk about the governance. So, the different actors in lifelong learning, the public sector, the private sector, the civil society organizations. Can you tell us what they do or what they should not do in case, that they stop doing? How these actors can be better coordinated for better results?
Absolutely. You are using the magic word of coordination. That's really, really important, especially if we take the system overall and we have an helicopter view. We see that we have to move from an idea of an education system which is predominantly based on a formal education, school-based, whether it's in a college or primary or secondary schools or university, onto a view of a system which is much broader. The boundaries of lifelong learning imply an extended system. It encompasses also non-formal education, informal education, everything we learn why we work or why we study ourselves, or we apprehend from our peers. It means that such a system includes, of course, the public institutions, and they remain and they will always remain the most important part, the skeleton of any learning system: ministries, national agencies, as well as local authorities. In Europe and in other parts of the world, very often systems are decentralized to a certain extent, so regional or local authorities play the role as well. And here we have the public sector. But when we move on to the non-state actors, we have businesses, and businesses means individual corporates, companies, small companies, associations, social partners, chambers. We are here hosted by the chamber. You are an important actor in a lifelong learning landscape, and this debate, these 2 days, I think, is a full demonstration of it. But at the same time, in the non-state, among non-state actors, we also have other type of organizations which represent the civil society. And in lifelong learning, they do play a role. If we think to people who need a second chance education, adults that are not able or they cannot access a formal or well-organized vocational training, retraining, or professional retraining because they miss fundamental skills, they miss literacy, for example. So there is a need to fill in many gaps. Civil society organizations very often also play the role of mediators. I don't want to, I spend more on civil society because throughout the many speakers before me, they have illustrated very well and better than than what I can do, the role of private sector. But we also have civil society organizations that are often mediator between public services and private sector. You were mentioning employment. What are the employment outcomes? That's really, really important. And public employment services, even at local level, very often ally with non-governmental organization or non-profit organization or social enterprises in order to reach out people who are unemployed, people who would not go spontaneously to seek for assistance of a public employment service. So there are many bridges to build, many connections to make, because lifelong learning is a very articulated and complex landscape where there are different roles to play in order to make it effective.
But you say I can listen from your words that there is discussion and cooperation and more than coordination among these actors, let's say. Who starts this discussion? Who starts the dialogue? Whose priority is to do that? How it happens? I mean, because in Greece, I don't know if you have participated in earlier sessions, we lack this coordination and dialogue among the actors. How do you manage to have the coordination in other countries, although we are quite talkative in Greece, eh?
Yeah, I mean, there is no one blueprint solution, but what I have observed, we at the European Training Foundation have observed in our work is that the public sector has a very important role, and very often is the public sector, that takes the initiative, because others may not be ready to do it, or they may not be prepared, or they may lack the necessary trust to initiate such a process. So it's the responsibility of the public sector to set the conditions for trust to be created and dialogue to be initiated. That said, in some countries, not in Greece, but the European Training Foundation works and cooperates with countries outside European Union, we have also observed cases of private sector taking the initiative, because the public sector, the government, wasn't ready to do that. And if there is a need for skills, if there is a skills shortages, and therefore there is a strong motivation for skills, the private sector can be the one who takes the initiative. We have seen situations of partnerships where most of the funding, we are not talking about huge budgets, but still most of the funding came in the first place from the private sector, from the business, because of the need for skills. So it depends on situation. There is no one recipe. Public sector remains
the
owner, of course, and also the public sector can set the rules and play the music as we
set
like
the rules and assess also, eh?
And assess. I think what you said is very important about the how. This is very often the concern of the work at European Training Foundation, the how, because we have many examples, many models, many regulations, but even when reforms are done, and it's already a big achievement to have a new legislation, but still what is needed are implementing mechanisms. And for coordination, you do need mechanisms for coordination. A coordination mechanism can be something simple as, a calendar of meetings with a clear purpose and agenda. This is something very simple, but it can become more complex and articulated, such as a skills agency at local level. Why not a territory which is so vibrant, with a promising economy, should not have its own
And
skills.
closer to the needs,
Closer
closer to the needs of the market.
Closer to the needs. I mean, needs assessment, it's always a very important starting point. And who assess the needs? This is a governance questions. Are the needs assessed, from behind the desk in an office, in a ministry, or are these assessed jointly? And the key word is jointly, by the public authorities and the private sector. So who assess the needs, and then who evaluates or assess the results, the outcomes of the training programs that were meant to respond to those needs. So the importance of designing processes on agreeing on specific coordination mechanisms, because without this mechanism, we don't function very well, right? We cannot rely only on voluntarism or spontaneity. This is
we need the framework.
We need a framework, and we need a little bit of rules and procedures to guide us, that things ought to be done in a certain way and by a certain deadline. Again, it doesn't need to be necessarily something very complex. And I would like to add, I mean, talking about governance, you cannot speak about governance without talking about financing. In order to advance lifelong learning, we need money. The UNESCO latest report and agreement of all member states globally, member states of UNESCO, they have committed to raise the expenditure for education up to the level of between 4 and 6% of GDP. Now it varies. In many countries is at this level or even slightly above, but in the majority of the countries worldwide, it remains below. And or between 15 and 20% of total public expenditure. So we have two parameters, and they ideally should be both met. But this is a bold message. We have to be very clear that training and retraining and education and skills for the labor market from early childhood on to all our professional life and beyond, it will cost money. Sometimes people in education dislike the term human capital or human capital development, which is understandable because it may remind some only profit-oriented approach. But the advantage of the human capital terminology is that implies that education and training is an investment. It's not a cost, it's not a loss, but it's something.
But it is difficult to assess it. I mean, it's an investment, but it is very difficult to say, because you know that there was a proposal even to put it in the financial books as an investment and measure the ROI, the return on this investment, but it is very difficult, isn't it, to assess it?
It is very difficult. There are econometric studies done by prominent economists, and I have a lot of respect, and I think we have now a very rich literature, even compared to only 20 years ago. We have many more sources. Yet I'm still convinced that the most important argument is the negative argument. If we do not invest in education and training, we know the consequences are very negative for the economy, for the society. So I still believe that, this is the strongest argument, the negative one. If we don't do that, the society cannot flourish.
Are the funds from the recovery plan able to boost a little bit more this financing?
Absolutely.
Because employers complain that they do not have the funds, especially in Greece after a almost 10 years period of recession. But even before and even after, there was always a good excuse that places Greece among the the lowest countries in the ranking of lifelong learning. And again, having the talent paradox that we do not find people with the right skills. So is the recovery fund able to boost the financial issue a little bit?
The recovery fund can be used for education and training by all means. This is a recommendation by the European Commission. The European Commission cannot enter into the specific decisions of how each single euro is allocated, but the message is very clear that money can be used, and there is a certain say encouragement to use money in order to increase spending on education and training, and let's say more in general skills development. Employers have a say. So I go back from they are part of the landscape. They should take up the role in the governance, and if they see an opportunity that the recovery fund shall have a slightly or much more allocation to education and training, they should voice it. So this is the level of negotiation at national level in each European member states, but definitely this is a possibility. That said, funding must increase. It will not occur, it will not happen overnight. And here we need to speak about partnership also when it goes to funding. What mechanism, what incentives, what fiscal benefits can be discussed, but public-private partnerships implies also co-financing. And when I say public-private partnerships, we have to, move away from the now model of say, classical long-term infrastructure where the state contracts out public work basically through a financial contract. Talking about mechanism, a financial contract for a company or a consortium to implement and to build a public infrastructure. This is normally big money, long-term project, and so on. There have been contested results, but public-private partnership is not only that. It has a wider meaning. It implies also the level of, how policies are designed and how programs are designed. Here we come to your question. So to which extent there can be a level of discussion, co-decision, because, whereas the classical type and not always successful model of PPP was framed by the paradigm of new public management, here now we have in an era of public governance, public value. And when we speak about public value, it doesn't mean that it's only the public sector creating the public value. It's the society, is also the private sector. So how to have type of PPPs that are oriented to this value, to outcomes, in our case, good quality skills, good quality employment, access to labor market for everyone without leaving no one behind. So there are PPPs that nowadays are called sometimes public-private development partnerships. Sometimes they are called multi-actor partnerships because they engage not just one single contractor, they engage a variety of actors, and they have a purpose of developing skills and putting together not only resources, financial resources, but capacities to be able to do what none of the members would be able to do alone, either the public or the third sector or the business. So different type of partnerships and public-private development of multiple partnerships that are oriented to benefit for the business, but also benefit for the people, for the individuals. So good quality skills and employability.
We need to have an extra session behind the cameras in order to understand or in order to better have some success stories from partnerships There used to be some in my mind, but I'm sure that there are many more than the ones that I know, because this will be very useful in really having the essence of partnership and not just the outsourcing or the contracting out, etc., that it was very prevalent. As time is limited, I would like Ms. Taurelli to tell us about the GLAD initiative, because I think that it liaises what we are talking now about the partnerships and the action and the actors, if you agree as well.
Of course, thank you for asking about GLAD. GLAD stands for Governance, Learning, Action, and Dialogues. And it is a project, but it's also a network, is a very new initiative, which with my team, we have launched less than 2 months ago. And the idea is that you can, or we can all learn about governance. It's very difficult to change governance. It doesn't occur by, a regulation or legislation. There are many cultural and traditional issues behind you. Mrs. Koussia, you have reminded this yourself. So it cannot be done by decree, so to say. What we have observed over the years is that it's important and possible to learn about governance mechanism between peers through mutual learning, to exchange, to comparing practices. But it's also important not to stop at the learning stage. It's important to act, so that using lessons or using experience, a country or a city or a sector can improve the practice and move on. Again, there are no magic recipes, but it's very important, this notion of learning at the level of organizations. What I want to say is that we ask people with this human capital development, lifelong learning, European policies, that each individual should learn, and we expect each of us to take responsibility for developing one's skills and so on. But why shouldn't we ask the same to organizations? We need organizations that are able to learn, to build on their successes, on their mistakes. Who doesn't make mistakes, but the important is to draw lessons. So learning is also for organizations.
Future-ready companies have one character among their characteristics is that they have organizations that they are willing to learn, not just individuals, and they see it as an ecosystem. Mrs. Taurelli, if you do not have anything else to add, I would like to thank you. But if you have, a minute or something to add that I missed to ask you, please do.
Thank you very much, and also congratulations for this inspiring conference. I think that with the changes in the learning and in the society, a reflection about the governance can really help to make a next step. And in governance, there are two simple but very important questions that we should ask ourselves. How to do? How to move from policy design, strategies, principles onto implementations. And the second very important question is who? Who is involved? Who should take initiative? Who should be responsible to carry on? So the how and the who are very important in order to improve the governance. And if the governance improves, the whole system of lifelong learning may do a step forward.
We really thank you for the very humorous and lively lessons that you gave us to this short presentation. And I hope that in one way or another, we can become closer participants of your GLAD initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Much.
Thank you.